Okay. All right. Once again, hello and welcome everyone. Very good morning. A very good evening, and thanks for joining another session on India's major military battles post-independence. Uh, in fact, today the in the boudhik, the court, right, about the mental weakness. So what we perceive in our mind is what we are or what we do. So this today's session is a lot about what says a lot about that says about India, that how we recover from the shackles or the setback of 1962 war with China, and how we gave it back. So far we have covered all these wars. Like we started with 1947-48 war with Pakistan, and then we covered 1962 war with China. Then again we had a war with Pakistan in 1965. So we have covered these wars in detail, and everything is recorded and published on YouTube in case you want to refer back. So today we'll continue with the series with another significant and one of the most underrated event, I would say, that happened between India and China in 1967. But before I delve further, I just want to reiterate, I want to set expectation that this is not about blaming any name, place, person, or religion. Neither it is about raising any questions on our leaders on how things have been done in past or what has been done in past. This session is more to learn from our history, from our leaders, and to respect our nation and armed forces. So please be with us in that same spirit. And I want to start quoting my references, as all the information in my slide is publicly available over internet and various books. So moving on, I want to start this time by recommending a book to those of you are interested in reading about these events. So this book, Watershed 1967, India's Forgotten Victory over China, by Prabal Das Gupta, is a very good book on one of the smallest yet fearsome battle that India fought with China. So in the 1967 battle was the moment of redemption, as I was saying, for India, where China was pushed back. And for the first time, China realized that this is not the same India of 1962. And it has to deal with India very differently now. India came out of the ignominy of 1962 fiasco loudly and clearly, and established itself as a like-for-like neighbor for China, and showed the world that we are capable and very much able to defend ourselves from any of these such aggressors. So yeah, it's a very interesting war or battle. We'll see how it spans up. And for those who are not too fond of reading and like Bollywood masala movies, I would recommend go watch JP Datta's Paltan movie with some typical Bollywood masala and melodrama. This is still a very good watch and sticks to the core theme. Can we do a quick show of hands who have already watched this movie? All right, not many. Okay, that's good. That will be that will make my session good and interesting. All right. So well, let's start. So how it all began, as we all know, I mean, historically, tensions continue to run across Indo-China border, and after 1962 defeat, Indian Army reinvented itself. We rigorously invested in our armed forces, both in equipment and personnel and trainings. For example, we raised around 7 mountain divisions. Now, mountain divisions, I think we have covered in one of our previous sessions. These divisions are specifically trained for such high altitude warfare, which is there on the northern part of our border with Pakistan and China. We nearly doubled our deployed forces in the disputed region. In fact, there were few places at the border where both Indian and Chinese forces were deployed very near to each other, like, for example, Chumbi Valley, and especially Nathu La Pass alongside the Sikkim-Tibet border, where both forces were stationed around just 20 to 30 meters apart. Can you imagine that? And since the border was not clearly demarcated, China continued its forward movement every now and then sporadically at various places. Another reason we could attribute is to this aggression was Sikkim. So Sikkim was always a sore point. China never liked Sikkim being India's protectorate. Now let me explain what I mean when I say protectorate. Today, when you see Sikkim, it is one of the state of Republic of India. But back then it was not like that. Before 1947, Sikkim was an independent country and was a British protectorate. A protectorate means a state that is controlled and protected by another sovereign state, mainly bigger and better in size. So it is basically a dependent territory that has been granted local autonomy over most of its internal affairs, but its foreign policy and external affairs are still being controlled by a more powerful sovereign state or a country without being in its direct possession. So that's why Sikkim was a protectorate. Now, when the Britishers were gone, after independence, the Chogyals are Sikkim monarchs. Sikkim had a monarchy. So Chogyals is a term of Sikkim monarchs. Now, Chogyas asked for India's help to fight its internal unrest. So Sikkim had a huge internal unrest and civil unrest was going on inside the country. It was complete chaos inside Sikkim, and it asked for India's help, and it became then India's protectorate. And then 20 years after independence, on May 16, 1975, Sikkim became 22nd state of Indian Union, and the monarchy was abolished, obviously because India was a democracy. So Sikkim always aligned with India, and hence it was a sore eye for China because of its strategic importance of its border, because Sikkim was just alongside Tibet. So it had a strategic Sikkim-Tibet border. And China already showed his intentions during the 1965 war, which I already covered last time, where it sided with Pakistan and gave fierce ultimatum to India to vacate Nathu La Pass in 1965 itself. However, back then, the then General Officer in Command of 17 Mountain Division, Major General Sagat Singh, who is here, who you can see in this inset. So Major General Sagat Singh refused to do so, arguing that Nathu La was on the watershed, which comprised a natural boundary. So now when I say watershed is a natural kind of a water body which bifurcates two regions. So on one side of the watershed was Chinese Tibet region, and the other side was Sikkim, Nathu La Pass. So fun fact is Major General Sagat Singh was played by Jackie Shroff in Paltan. So those of you have not seen. So let us take a pause and familiarize ourselves with the region that we are talking here. Now these are the two places, Nathu La and Cho, where the war or the battle or the incident, whatever we may choose to call it, was fought. But let me give you a perspective on Google Map. So this is Nathu La and this is Chola. Let me zoom in a bit, zoom out a bit. So if you see here, so this is Nathu La and Chola. Can you see? So these Nathu La and Chola are just few kilometers apart, and this is Sikkim. On the right, you are seeing Bhutan. On the left, you are seeing Nepal, and you can see above it's all Tibet. So it's you can see the strategic importance to China, why it was so important to China, because of this pass and the proximity to Tibet. All right, let me go back to my slides. Okay. So on the incidents and the unrest was always there on the borders, and on 13th August 1967 onwards, the Chinese started digging trenches, which were clearly on the Sikkim side of the boundary, and Indian forces obviously objected to it. But after some drama, Chinese didn't budge, and instead they started putting up loudspeakers as loudspeakers, and they still do it today. I mean, if you have read the news, they still do that. It's an emotional tactic to bring Indian armed forces or the soldiers at the border under pressure. So they put around 25 to 30 odd loudspeakers and played Bollywood songs on them. But we then decided that it's going a bit too much, and we our high command Indian Army high command decided and gave orders to lay out barbed wires. Barbed wires are those iron this picture like wires, pointed wires, to just demarcate, to clearly demarcate the boundary, because it was always both sides were saying, no, this is my land, this is my land. So we decided to lay out the barbed wires. And then Chinese troops, seeing that, Chinese took positions around 18th August onwards against Indian troops, but they did not do any firing till then. On 7th of September, when Indian Army soldiers were laying out the barbed wire on the southern side of Nathu La Pass, the Chinese commander, along with the troops, rushed to the spot and issued serious warning. And in fact, a hand-to-hand scuffle took place between them, and some of the soldiers were seriously injured, including Lieutenant Colonel Rai Singh Yadav, who was commanding the unit at Nathu La Pass. So then a final nail in the coffin was laid at 5:30 a.m. in the morning of September 11th, 1967. Lieutenant Colonel Rai Singh and his men were strengthening the barbed wire to prevent trespassing. And the Chinese, this was not very well accepted by the Chinese as usual, and its political commissar approached with an infantry section and objected to the laying of the barbed wire. However, Lieutenant Colonel Rai Singh refused to stop, and again a scuffle broke. But this time, Chinese just went back into their bunkers, and while soldiers were laying down the wire, a whistle was blown from the Chinese side, and it was followed by a medium machine gun firing against Indian troops from the northern shoulder. We were completely unprepared at that point of time, and due to the lack of the cover in the pass, Indian troops initially suffered heavy casualties, and shortly thereafter, Chinese opened fire with artillery, mortar, and recoilless guns. However, on a bigger picture, we were prepared for this kind of misadventure this time, and we had all the backup artillery, and we started artillery fire from our side. Now the clashes lasted throughout day and night for next continuous 3 days, and all artilleries, mortars, machine guns were used by the Indian troops, and we really beat back Chinese forces this time. We were already at the advantageous position because of the occupation of high ground in the past, like in Sebula and Camel's Back. We were able to destroy many Chinese bunker at Nathu La Pass. And 5 days after the clashes had started, a ceasefire was arranged. And on 15th September and 16th September, the corpses, the dead bodies of the fallen soldiers were exchanged in the Nathu La Pass. So as you can see, if you compare to a previous wars, this was a comparatively short duration war or an incident. But we successfully repelled Chinese forces back into their side with major casualties on the Chinese side. Another incident on the similar lines of Nathu La happened on 1st October 1967, where a clash between India and China took place at Chola. I showed you when I was showing you the map. It was few kilometers north from Nathu La, which is another pass on the Sikkim-Tibet border, and that's why it is again strategic, again of strategic importance to China. And as per the war historians, the duel was initiated by Chinese troops after a scuffle between the two, when Chinese troops infiltrated again into the Sikkim side of the border and claimed that the pass was theirs, and questioned the Indian occupation of it. This military duel just lasted for 1 day, during which Chinese were pushed away. Because this was such a short duration scuffle and a battle, and Chinese were pushed back, And one of the Indian Major General Sheru Thapalial says that Chinese were forced to withdraw nearly 3 kilometers inside the Chola during this clash. So this really boosted Indian morale. This session will never be complete without mentioning the names of a few bravehearts, though we really can never do justice to this segment, as we have infinite stories of bravery and valor of our men at armed forces. So, but still, let's explore 3 such incidents who were awarded Mahavir Chakra, Indian Armed Forces second highest gallantry award. Now, when the Chinese opened sudden fire in Nathu La on September 11th, the troops under Lieutenant Colonel Rai Singh of 2 grenadiers, here you can see Lieutenant Colonel Rai Singh in the inset, retaliated. He retaliated with all the, because those guys were unprepared, right? So he retaliated with whatever available weapons they had. He himself, being at the such a high position, or himself being Lieutenant Colonel, he himself opened LMG fire on the Chinese bunker and provided cover fire for his troops to come back to the safe place. But soon his bunker was damaged, and he came out in the open and helped his fellow troops by engaging from various different positions before being hit by a bullet in his stomach and a splinter in his head, at the back of his head. And while he was being evacuated, he continued giving order to his troops, and he himself changed the course of the battle. He is also known as Tiger of Nathu La due to this courageous incident and the way he led his forces on this Nathu La incident. So then Major Harbhajan Singh of 18 Rajputs, he was again on the same day present at the same place. He was commanding a company which was protecting engineers who were laying the barbed wires. Now, when Chinese opened sudden fire, and he realized that his men were caught under attack and were not prepared, he shouted towards his men to attack the Chinese forces, and he himself, barehanded, he bayoneted 3 Chinese soldiers alone. And bayonet is that small knife that is on top of the rifle. So he manhandled them. Manually, he bayoneted 3 Chinese soldiers and moved forward. And there was a LMG which was causing much destruction. He came in front of the LMG. He destroyed that LMG by throwing the hand grenade on top of it. But in doing all this, he made the supreme sacrifice of his life. Major General Harbhajan Singh of 18 Rajput. Similarly, Lieutenant Colonel Mahtam Singh of 10 Jackraff was commanding a battalion of Jammu and Kashmir rifles at Chola. He's on the rightmost side that you can see. He was awarded Mahavir Chakra for his tenacious handling of the sector and thwarting the attack of the enemy almost immediately. And he didn't let them proceed any further. You can imagine that the incident or the battle was just over within a day. So throughout, Lieutenant Colonel Mahtam Singh displayed exemplary courage, leadership, and devotion to duty above and beyond. So yeah, these are just the 3 incidents, just as a reference point. But if when you get time, just browse through the books and available articles. You'll find many such brave incidents and stories of valor for this incident as well. Now, golden question: why it did what it did? By it, I mean China, obviously. I put it in a way that makes things interesting, but why it did. So, unambiguous boundary, yeah, I mean, we already discussed the boundary was unambiguous. No one agreed to the boundary. So, incursions did happen over a period of time. China was not comfortable after 1962 India's military expansion. So, we almost exponentially grew in our military or armed forces strength. So, it was definitely not comfortable with that. India had territorial dominance over Sikkim because Sikkim was protectorate of India, and obviously it was also of strategic importance to China. So this was a sore point. And we discussed during our 1962 war session that one of the reasons for China's venture into war at that time to India with India was to save its grace from its disastrous failure of its internal government because of the Great Leap Forward movement. This itself, the Greatly Forward movement caused massive famine and economical disaster just few years earlier, and there was a huge domestic discontent. And to gain some nationalistic insight, Mao Zedong launched 1962 attack, right? So while I was exploring some CIA archives for this session, and I've attached a snapshot. So around this, I was exploring CIA archives around the same time. Now it is interesting to note that Mao Zedong, who was the chairman of Chinese, the CPC, China People's Party, has launched a cultural revolution in China. It was so this cultural revolution was a socio-political movement in China that lasted from around 1966 to 1976. It's the stated goal was to basically dominate China with the Maoism. So its stated goal was to preserve Chinese communism by purging any capitalist or traditionalist elements in the Chinese society, to reimpose Mao Zedong influence and bring in Maoism, which we call in India. In India, we call it Maoism, right? So that was the intended goal. So this revolution marked Mao's return into the central position of power in China, uh, and obviously he needs to recover from his failure of Great Leap of China. So under this garb of nationalist movement, another attack on India could have helped Mao attain brownie points. But looking at the Indian retaliation at this time, this particular incident could never escalate that further. So we were successful in curbing this. Again, this is just my insight. I may be wrong, but I thought of mentioning it here. Well, every war there are casualties. Indians, as per Indian Defense Ministry, we 88 soldiers were killed and 163 were wounded on the Indian side, and 340 soldiers were killed and 450 were wounded on the Chinese side. So this was a massive impact on the China. That's why obviously Chinese have their own numbers. They don't agree to this, but we'll go by what Indian ministry says, as I believe in what our ministry says. That's pretty much it. With that, we reclaimed our glory, and since then, we all know it's pretty peaceful and manageable until now, and I hope things will continue as they were. In fact, they will get a bit better. With that, I rest my case. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you, Abhinavji. Any question for Abhinavji?
Yeah, Abhinavji, just one question from me.
Yes, sir.
Sir, like this Bhutan is still a protectorate of India, right?
It was, but I'm not sure about the latest status. I need to check, Sanjay
It is still, yeah. It's just okay. One question always bothers me. Why it is not becoming one of the states of India then?
That's a politically loaded question. There are many political tangents to that.
Because one thing here, they don't have an embassy, or they don't have diplomatic engagement with China still. And I think if they want to communicate anything to China, they do it through New Delhi's Chinese embassy.
Yeah.
So that is what I know, but yeah.
So what's the question? So I mean, so you want it to become a Indian state, right?
It should be what is the point of just being a protectorate and doing it's kind of, then it's a for Sikkim now. I think China has more or less accepted it as a state of India.
It has not accepted, but yeah. So since
no, it now has I think when Vajpayee went to China, at that point of time they accepted Sikkim as a state of India, but not publicly. But basically, they wanted India to accept Tibet as one of their, it's part of China, which India did, and they tacitly accepted that Sikkim is state of India, part of India.
Yeah, but it does not matter. I mean, it does not matter what they don't even recognize Arunachal Pradesh, right? So it
So
doesn't
I think
matter
that
what they mean or not.
yeah, means
Right?
we
So
can
we
keep on
don't go.
arguing, but I
Yeah.
think